I'm the head of technology integration here at Raha, and I wanted to try to put together some ideas and suggestions really based on what I'm finding is helpful in our family between my wife and I as we look to parent our daughter. So we've got a 5-year-old daughter. She's just started EY1 this year, and so I'm really just sort of at that starting point of really what's going on with the technology and how it's being used and really how we're using it at home. So for this presentation, I wanted to start off by really trying to bring some context to the environment that we find ourselves in here in 2019. So we'll look at that context. We'll try and piece together all of, well, not all of them, but some of the parts that actually really make for why this is a tricky and a complicated issue, and why many of us are looking for help and support with it. So we'll look at the context, and then I'll provide some suggested ideas and what we're trying in our house, and we'll move forward from there. Yeah, so parenting I'm beginning to understand now as a parent. It must have always been difficult. I'm sure it's always been a challenge for every parent that's gone through it. But right now we've got this vast extra online dimension that is massive and literally growing on a daily basis. We've got students that are growing up with the potential for social media accounts, and this environment that's been created where we're looking for likes, we're looking for that reinforcement. And in order to get that, students, not just students, but people are prepared very often to do some extraordinary things. And if you do a Google search you'll see some of the incredibly stupid things many people do to try and get a huge following. And we've also got then, with this online presence, a huge amount now of fake news and information. And all of this really impacts what's going on for us and makes it, I believe, difficult when we're at home. I don't know if you've heard of Simon Sinek before, but incredibly interesting person. There's lots of YouTube videos where he's talking and explaining many things around what it's like to grow up as a millennial and enter the workplace. And in particular, it really helped me to understand some of what's going on. So he talks in a YouTube video that goes about this, talking about how dopamine is this chemical that's in the brain. And when we interact with social media, when we interact with our phones, this chemical is released. And it's highly addictive. And so the more that we use it, the more we come back to it, and the more we start using it again and again and again. And so that's something that's going on. That's something. So even for us, for children, they're getting that chemical that's being released, that's then encouraging them to go back and find more to use the device more and more and more. And he also talks a lot about how everything's changing now, and it's interesting, when we come in to a situation like this, especially we don't know people, but the first thing very often we'll do is we'll turn to our phones, we'll pick up our phones, and we'll start looking at that instead of engaging and interacting with people around us. And because of that, it makes it very difficult to build those really deep relationships which are built on trust. And he talks in the video a lot about people, particularly in meetings, when you go to a meeting and people will be sat around a table and everyone's on their phone, and then as soon as the meeting starts, they put the device away. But they haven't had those conversations, and he talks about, for example, checking on someone, how potentially their parent is, if they've been ill or unwell, and having those connections, those small, often innocuous conversations, how that helps to build a deeper level of trust. And so it made me think about, what's going on in my house when I'm, on my device, instead of having some of those conversations with my daughter as well. So we've got that going on. Fake news, it's everywhere, and it's really important that we that we're aware of that, and that we acknowledge it, and that we talk to our children about the fact that there is this misinformation that's out there. And so being aware of it gives us then this greater understanding and starting to question the information that's being provided and where has that come from, and what's the purpose behind the person actually sharing that information. Where did that come from, and why are they pushing that particularly? It's, you know, in this digital online world, it's very easy for any of us to take some information and be able to push it out to a global audience very quickly. Previously, in previous generations, they didn't have that. There was barriers around, you know, the cost of printing that sort of made it much more difficult for people to be able to do that. But nowadays, we've got sort of free range around that. So it's really important that we then ensure that we're having regular discussions around that information and where it's coming from and what's going on. So a lot of the fake news gets spread through social media, and it's important to remember really what the minimum age is for all of these social media accounts. Actually, 13 is the minimum age. But what we find is that younger than 13, we do have students that are in school. Now, within the school, we're able to put blocks on social networking so that on their device that's connected to the Wi-Fi, they're not able to access any of these social media accounts, even if they're of 13 or older. We have those all closed down. However, if they've got a mobile phone and it's got cellular data on it, then they've got access to that, you know, and that's a lot more challenging to be able to control, and we do that instead in the ways that, you know, phones aren't allowed out during lesson time. So we have that those restrictions in place. But it is 13, and we then have children that are, you know, pushing the boundaries on that. Last year, I overheard a child in one of the lessons I was teaching, and he was working away, but he was talking to his friend, and as he was doing that, he was 12, and he was talking about Instagram. He was like, yeah, you know, I've really got to do something. I've only got 11 followers, and this was, you know, obviously like something really concerning to him at that point in his life. And again, you know, I think back and I think, you know, we've always had that desire within school to be accepted within our class and to have that safety and, you know, to feel like we belong. But now, for students, you know, that's not enough. Just their class of 25 to 30 students, you know, even their grade level. You know, these students, and I got the feeling, you know, he was looking for sort of 500 was, you know, what he was looking for, you know, which is just for a 12-year-old, it's just vast. And really, what is the depth of the relationship that he's having with those students? So this was an article in the Harvard Graduate School of Education that was looking at what was going on between, you know, social media and teen anxiety, and what's the connection there. Effectively, it sort of realized that it was almost too difficult to judge completely. The concluding statement was just that it was a complicated relationship. So there's still a lot going on, and that raises the point that really, you know, this is where we're at, but we're learning through this at the moment. We're learning as we're going with a lot of this, and a lot of the studies that are taking place have a lot of fake news in them, misinterpretation. You know, it's very difficult at the moment to get a full, genuine idea on what is going on. So just to sort of recap then that context, it's sort of, you know, it kind of went back and forth about this, but it almost points quite a bleak picture in many ways, you know, about the difficulties that we're experiencing here. We've got the fact that we've got devices and social media that can be very addictive. We've got all of this fake news and information that we're struggling with, and this potential area around what's going on between social media, teen anxiety. If we're looking for those sort of 500, 1,000 followers, what is it that we're prepared to do to get that, rather than actually interacting with the students in our classes? Now, as I said at the start, I'm head of technology integration here, and, you know, firm believer in the power of good that these devices and the software and everything can provide. And it's really ensuring that we're trying to create an environment where we can work together, home and school, to ensure that we're supporting the students and making good choices with the ways that we're using them. Also want to reference a little bit going on. There was a survey done by Norton, which is one of the big security specialists, who did a survey called My First Device. So they were looking at lots of different countries and what was going on with the age that people were getting their first devices and things. One of the things that came out, which sort of supported, I think, the fact that we're seeing so many people here again today, is how many parents are looking for support and advice on how to protect their children online. This is important, and it's really good to see that, particularly in the UAE, how many parents are taking this seriously and looking to do the best job possible for ensuring safety for their children. Okay, so now that's sort of the context. So now I'd like to start to look at some of the ways that, as a family, we've looked at approaching this and some of the things that we've tried to do. But I thought this was an interesting one to start off with. The number of parents that say that they're spending too much time online, and that's setting a bad example. So a big area for us is looking at this idea of modeling appropriate behavior. It was a real eye-opener for my wife and I when one day our daughter, I can't remember how old she was at the time, maybe 2 or 3, she picked something up and pretended it was a phone. And she started walking around with this phone, and then we'd talk to her and ask her what she was doing, and she would kind of like put her hand up and be like, shh. This is more important. And we'd ask her to put it down. No way. We'd have breakfast, and the phone came and had to be on the table at breakfast. It's like, no, we don't need that. You can put your toys away. And for us realizing that that behavior, that was learned from us. That's where she was seeing this and where it was coming from. And for us, it was kind of like, okay, we've got to try to change the way that we're modeling our device use in the house and in the home. So I encourage all of us really to think and try to be aware of when we're using our device. What are we using it for? Do we really need it at that moment? Or is it, what is it for? Why are we using it? The next thing with that is then the communication. So as I talked about, having the device isn't a problem, and it's how we're using it, how we're modeling it, and all the rest of it. So in terms of the communication, one of the things that we've tried to do is then start to talk and explain what it is we're using the device for. So if we are sending somebody a message about meeting up, or if we're wanting to call someone, we're picking it up and we're basically commentating on what we're doing at home now when we're using our technology. So we're trying to pick up the device and say, I'm just picking this up to send a message to Miss Jasmine to let her know, to invite her to come to this meeting. And then we put it down. And trying to be deliberate and for her to see that. And again, thinking back, for me growing up in my house as a child, we had a television, one television that was in the living room, and there was a phone, and that phone was in the public domain. So whatever was being watched on television, everyone was aware of. Whenever somebody called the house, you could hear what was going on, or you could hear half of it, and you could kind of understand what was going on. But now we've become so much more insular, really, in what we're doing because of these personalized devices that we have. And we literally can have no idea what the person sitting next to us is doing at any moment in time. And literally nothing. And start thinking about all of the things that somebody literally could be doing right next to you without you knowing. So starting to talk and communicate and make sure that you're having those discussions, what it is that you're using it for. And like I say, being a commentator, really, and And another thing that's really great on the phones now, the messaging and WhatsApp and iMessage and all the rest of it, is the voice messages. So it's kind of getting back as well to those days before, where the person can be involved in that messaging as well. And again, my daughter loves that, being able to send Granny in England a voice message, and then hearing one back later on. She absolutely loves that. And if we're sending messages, doing it through those voice messages instead, she can understand what it is we're using the device for. There's a purpose, and there was a point, and there was something that we came to. So yeah, thinking around using devices in bedrooms and students being able to take it away, and it's not necessarily that that's always going to be something that's wrong, but as long as we've set up some of those areas around the communication, what is it that we're using it for, then ensuring that we're trying to keep our children as safe as possible. One of the things that we also then decided to do one morning on the weekend was to create essential agreements. And essential agreements, these are very often used in classrooms. So they're used to create like a joint ownership of what's going on in the space, the shared values, what it is that we expect from each other and we're prepared to live our lives by. So we sat down and took just about 15 minutes. We got one piece of paper and we just tried to come up with 5 ideas around the ways that we were going to use our devices in our house. And so this was the piece of paper. So we all chipped in with writing and drawings to make it appropriate. So the first thing was that we set out was that we didn't want any devices on the table. So when we're eating, when we're coming to our meal times, we keep it away. Next one, nothing in the bathroom. Third one, communicating. So talking it through, like I talked about earlier, picking it up, being that commentator, what we're doing, why we're using it. Our daughter then also came up with this idea. She wanted a code word for if someone was using their technology too much. And no idea where this came from, but she decided it was going to be leopard. So whenever, and I checked with her this morning because we haven't had it for a while that it's been needed to be used. And thinking about this talk, and so I sat with her at breakfast and asked her if she remembered what the word was, and yeah, she said, yeah, leopard. And fifthly, not in the bedroom, not around sleeping time. So we put our devices away, and then we make sure that we do bedtime stories and everything as device-free as possible. So that's some of the things that we've done so far. We also, one of the other areas that we can look at is thinking about controlling the environment. So those are some of the proactive things that we're doing to try and change our behaviours. Now, in addition to that, there's also some other things that we can do to actually put controls on the environment as well. I wouldn't recommend just doing these. I would definitely recommend ensuring that you're working together to create those sort of essential agreements in the ways that you're looking at doing things, along with the potential for this. And so within controlling the environment, we've got the Wi-Fi that can be controlled, and then we've also got controls that can be put on our devices. So one of the things that we've chosen to do in our house with the Wi-Fi is make sure that we only have Wi-Fi in the main living area. So concrete walls here in Abu Dhabi is actually great for us. We're quite happy with that. So if we're using a device, it has to be in the main living area. As soon as we start branching out from that, it doesn't work so well and you get frustrated. So but that was a deliberate choice and works really well. We do have a hardwired internet into one room that we use as a bit of an office, so we have a desk to it, but you've actually got to physically plug in a laptop to be able to use it in that location. The other thing is then parental controls. And One of the things on Apple that's come out recently is this area that you can set up screen time. And with both Apple and Google, you can set up now family accounts. And if you haven't done this yet, I really encourage, and I'd be happy to help you look at doing this. But setting up a family account so that you are then able to see what's going on and be able to set screen times and set time limits and things like that on different devices. So this is Apple's one, and then Google also has set up for families as well. So you're in control as the parent, as the adult. This came out of that survey as well, that top 3 barriers to enforcing rules around the mobile use is 1, thinking that the child is tech savvy enough to get around the rules. Children will disobey them, and that you don't know enough about technology. So please, if there is anybody after this session and going forward, I am happy to help work with you individually to look at the setup you've got. Now, it can be very different, for each person individually. As I say, I've talked quite a bit about our setup in our house, but everyone's set up a little bit different with different accounts and different platforms. So really to be able to help and support, please do come and see me and talk to me individually. This is one of the things you can do is also actually set Wi-Fi time limits on your router. So this is what typically, if you've got the access into the router that's in your house, that you can set up. So you can either put a manual block on a certain time, 10 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock, depending whenever you want it to close it off, or you can specifically select it for different devices as well. So there is this potential, but now more and more there are those apps that come either built in through Apple or that you can get as well. So a search will come up. This was just from December. These things change constantly, so there's a couple here that I was just going to bring your attention to. This one, ZuluDesk. This one has this feature where you can control what apps are available at certain times of the day. This is something that we're looking to use and bring in as our mobile device management platform for all of our school-owned iPads within school, and then we'll look at seeing how this works in terms of parents. So this is something we're looking to be able to potentially offer for next school year. One that I know some parents here at school have used previously is RPact. There is a free section to it, and then there's a paid area that gives you further controls, but the free option is pretty good as well. And yeah, as I say, now there's sort of like the screen time availability in many of the apps. So if I come here and go to screen time there, I can start to see my screen time. Now this is my school device, so I don't have my family set up here. But if I click on this one on my phone, then I can control access to an iPad or whatever my daughter would have access to potentially with her child account that's part of mine. So that works quite well, and also gives you a real indication of what it is that you're using the device for. So a lot of this is around awareness. It's around understanding what is there, and being in a place where we're having those discussions to try and support our students navigate this difficult added extra dimension that we're facing at the moment.